Hi all, I'm Cailleach from Which Ways, and today I want to talk to you all about ways to connect and work with the different spirits of Samhain. I hope you enjoy. Most of us have heard that the veil is thin at Samhain, but what does that really mean? The way it makes sense to me is that the world of humans and spirits lie together and overlap in a lot of places. The veil is a barrier that separates those worlds, and as Samhain moves closer to us, that barrier thins and spirits can more easily visit and join with us. Samhain is a Celtic festival, so the spirits and deities that are most connected to this holiday come from Cornwall, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and England. But there aren't deities there who are specifically connected to the holiday itself. There are many deities and spirits who have some part of their story occurring at Samhain. So many modern witches often work with a broader range of deities and spirits connected to the underworld, death, and ancestors. And I often call on deities at Samhain to help the dead cross over. I'll invoke their name before reading the names of those who've died in the past year, light a candle, and ask the deity to help them find their way across. If someone had a difficult death or is still alive but struggling to pass, I'll ask the deity to help guide them across. If they were Christian, I might quietly ask them to call on their own God or guardian angels to open the gate and help them cross over. And if I'm having a hard time letting go of someone, I might ask a deity associated with the dead to help me release them. I think of Hecate as the midwife of the crossroads of grief, and I don't expect her to help me make the pain disappear, but she does help me integrate it. And another way that I work with deity and the dead is if I notice that someone close to me has become one of the unquiet dead and is lingering and isn't crossing, I'll make an offering to a deity associated with the dead or the underworld, and then I'll do some divination to see if there's any unfinished business that I can take care of and reassure them that it's all right to move on. And my next step is to light a candle, burn some incense like myrrh, and say something like, "You have been seen and remembered. It's time to depart and join your own beloved dead." Afterward, I tell them goodbye, cleanse myself in my home, and take a shower. And if the spirit isn't one of my beloved dead and shows up and is hanging around, I tell them to leave, and I do a triple clearing and banishing. Once I helped cross a really large group of unquiet dead with some other witches using bells, drums, and setting out food, making an offering to a deity and lighting a candle. I had to focus exclusively on my purpose. I just kept repeating that they must go and join those waiting for them on the other side. And I felt like it was pushing against a strong wind that I had to keep moving through and not stop and not let my focus waver. And so if you have a persistent spirit that won't go, ask for help from a more experienced witch if the simple things like clearing doesn't make them go. I wanted to talk about a few different deities that are associated with the dead and that modern witches work with. So of course the first one is Hecate. She's the Greek goddess of crossroads, ghosts, and witchcraft. And she's often called Queen of the Witches and the Dead, but she's much more than that. She was originally ruler of earth, sky, and sea, and she's also queen of the thresholds. And to work with her, you might want to give her an offering, and her offerings include figs, fish, garlic, honey, and red wine. The Cailleach, she's from Celtic tradition, and she's associated with Samhain because she rules the dark half of the year from Samhain to Beltane, and she's a guardian of the gates between death and rebirth and connected to the ancient burial mounds. You can offer whiskey or milk poured over rocks for her. One that's less well known is the god Donn, and they were a Celtic lord of the dead, said to have a house where his descendants waited before entering the other world or being reincarnated and reborn. And he is someone who can carry messages between the worlds if you're looking for that. Another group of spirits that work with the dead is psychopomps. They're not deities, they're sort of demigods or really powerful spirits. And psychopomp is a Greek word meaning soul guide, and they're spirits who guide the dead across. That's their whole job. We can call on them at Samhain to guide the dead or to guide us in trance or spirit work at this time of year. You can write a psychopomp's name beside a list of the recent dead and ask them to help those souls cross. Leave a glass of water, spirits, or burn a candle as an offering. Psychopomps can be animals like dogs, foxes, ravens, crows, or owls, and you can leave nuts or food that they like outside for them. They also can be divine figures, and here's a few that I've worked with. Charon, the Greek ferryman of the dead who accepts coins as an offering to take the dead across the river into the underworld. The Valkyries are Norse spirits who carried the slain off the battlefield to Valhalla, if you're from Nordic tradition, and they like meat, drink, or poetry. Gwen ap Nudd, Welsh leader of the Wild Hunt. And I'm not sure what his offerings are. I personally think of milk, honey, and oats, which are good for most of the Celtic spirits or deities. Manannán mac Lir is an Irish sea god and ferryman and can be called on to take messages to the dead or to help ferry them across. And even Epona, who is a Gaulish horse goddess who guides travelers and souls in the other world. And so, of course, at Samhain, we think of the ancestors. They're really strongly tied to this time of year. And you don't have to work with your blood ancestors if that doesn't feel right to you. There could be a lot of reasons that that doesn't feel right. You can, of course, work with adoptive ancestors if that feels right to you. That is totally fine. They don't have to be blood ancestors. You can also work with spiritual ancestors, those who inspire or share your life's work or your passion or your path. And when I'm calling on my ancestors, I like to work with the well and whole ancestors because they help their descendants survive and thrive, especially physically. And what they want most is to be remembered, to say their names and tell their stories. At Samhain, you can write letters to them and bury or burn those letters. You can always ask them for abundance help at any time of year. But if your ancestors lived in a part of the world where the harvest season was ending and winter was approaching at this season, now is an especially good time to ask them for help. The need for fall harvest to last throughout the winter months left a powerful imprint on our spiritual subconscious. It's something that all our ancestors were concerned about and really worked hard for and really wanted to make sure that their descendants and children stayed alive and that there was an abundant harvest to make sure that happened. So calling on that subconscious imprint at this time of year taps into that wish of the harvest season from our ancestors for us to survive and thrive and be abundant. So if you want to do that, it doesn't have to be really complex. It can be really easy. Just light a candle and say something like, I ask for abundance beyond expenditure so I can survive through the winter months. Offer apples, wine, water, food, or flowers. And I often give my mother daffodils when I can find them at this time of year, which is not often, because when I was little, she always bought violets for me and daffodils for herself. So if you have a beloved dead member on the other side and there were particular things that they like flowers, specific flowers you knew that they loved, make sure and offer those. And I think it's a really common misconception that it's only the ancestors who are around at Samhain, but in actual fact, the veil is thin for all spirits. So you might run into fae, local land spirits, and any other supernatural creatures that live where you are in your region. So they're very active right now. This also means it's a good time to start learning about new spirits, especially those of the underworld or the winter season. And if I'm going to do that, I like to begin with a really simple 3-card reading. So the first card I lay out once I've picked a spirit is a card that I might say something like, is working with this spirit in my best interest? And the second card might be, what do they bring to me? And the third one might be, what will our work together look like? And if you want, you can pull a fourth card asking your patron deity for insight. And for this kind of reading, I feel like the meaning of the cards might be difficult to interpret around those kinds of questions. So what I often do is just fall back on, is this a beneficial card? Or is it one that's traditionally seen as negative? Or how do you feel about it? Does it strike you as something like, yes, I'd like to explore that particular energy, even if you don't quite understand what it means? Or does it feel like something like, I don't know about that. I'm really not sure about that. In which case, if there's kind of more of a heavy weight on cards or more cards that feel negative or repelling to you, you might want to pass until you know a little bit more about that spirit. So if you feel called to connect with them after doing a reading of some kind, start by making an offering. Milk, honey, cordials, or incense, anything that feels right to you, and give them a space on your altar. And of course, before you give them a space on your altar, check in with a yes-no divination technique of some kind to ask your trusted familiar spirits if that feels right to them. And this is a really great time of year to work with spirits and improve relationships because the veil is thin. So if you already have some you work with, but maybe communication has been hard, and I've had a few like that, some it's like we didn't even speak the same language or have the same concepts. And so what I learned from that is nowadays, I would try to do a communication spell to improve things. So what I would do now is gather mugwort for intuition, rosemary for clear communication, and garden sage for wisdom. And then you could either dry them and burn them as an incense or make a charm bag. And then what I would do is write a short paragraph about the qualities of that spirit as you know or understand them. And you might have to do some research in order to write that paragraph. And then also have it be a little bit honoring of them, like a little bit of praising of them. Then place your charm bag nearby or burn the incense. Make an offering, light a candle, and state your wish to improve communication. And then you're going to have to watch really closely to see how they respond and figure that out. What are their signals that they're nearby? That could be dreams, signs as you're walking around, cards, or divination. And I want to say it can also show up as physical signs like coldness when the unquiet dead are around, or sometimes for me when my ancestors show up, I get images of a landscape and it feels really visceral in my body as if I'm remembering that landscape, but it's somewhere that I've never been. Or certain spirits show up and kind of make one side or one part of my body feel warmer or colder or kind of more tight or warm or loose. There can be a lot of different ways that they connect with you physically. So it's going to be subtle. It's not going to be like we envision it, of like where all of a sudden they start just telling you things. But for a few people it's like that. Most of it's not. Most of us have to really work to figure out when they're around and what their communication looks like. So I put a poll up about topics for Samhain, and this particular topic got a lot of interest in my poll, which really surprised me actually. But it's a big topic with a lot of different approaches and a lot of subcategories. So If I didn't cover what you were curious about, leave a comment and I'll try to follow up either with an answer or maybe with another video. So one that I didn't cover, for example, that some of you might be interested in is mediumship. For example, that's a whole other subject that requires training, so I couldn't really fit it in here. And if you enjoyed this, please drop a comment or a question, like, subscribe, share, hit that notification bell if you choose, and check out my newsletter, blog, and Patreon links in the description. I just put up a Samhain blog on my website, and I'll probably put a few more up. All right, all. Thank you, and until next time, stay safe and be well.